We too often let negative behavior or even performance slip into our workplaces. And it's not because we think it's acceptable, but it's because we just don't know what to do. So, friend, if you are dealing with a difficult employee in your workplace, yes, that one, then you are in the right place. Today, we are going to cover the practical tips and steps you need to know to manage well. Let's do it. Hello, and welcome to the Culture Keepers podcast. My name is Kara List, and I am your leadership coach. And here on the Culture Keepers podcast, we discuss topics that empower leaders just like you to cultivate thriving, connected workplace cultures. And one very, very easy way you can do that is in your weekly staff meetings. Now, it is no surprise to anyone that people don't love staff meetings. It's not the highlight of their week. And I get that, but it doesn't have to be that way. Those times together can be purposeful, they can be meaningful, and you can use them to build a more connected team. I have a template for you. It's the ultimate meeting kickoff. And it's what you can do in just the first 10 minutes to really solidify that weekly connection. It's 4 things you should absolutely do. So go ahead to heycaralist.com/kickoff and grab that ultimate staff meeting template today. Okay, let's jump in. It is rare as a leader that you find yourself managing a team that is void of difficult employees. If that is you, that is amazing, but it is not common. Most, if not all of us, are or have led organizations or teams with difficult employees. So what exactly do I mean when I say difficult? Because that can look like a lot of things. So we're going to kind of break it into 2 different categories today. Difficult when it comes to attitude and behavior, and then difficult when it comes to performance. So here are some examples of how an employee might be difficult when it comes to attitudes or behavior. I made a little list. Here they are: negative, unreliable, defensive, disruptive, uncooperative, passive aggressive, overbearing, argumentative, complacent, manipulative, hostile, insensitive, undermining, inflexible, stubborn, gossipy, egotistical, lazy, distracted, entitled. Whew, that was a long list. As I typed that out, I didn't feel as long as when I was saying it. That's a long list, but I'm sure you can add to it. And maybe even as I was saying it, you were connecting that employee you're thinking about with one of those behaviors or attitudes. I also have a list of performance difficulties. It could be missed deadlines, poor quality of work, low productivity, inconsistent performance, skill deficiency, failure to prioritize, excessive mistakes, inability to adapt, lack of initiative, failure to meet goals, dependent on you for all the answers. Those are some examples of what it could feel like to have an employee that is difficult because of their performance. Neither one of those categories should be ignored, and actually, they should be treated exactly the same. I think back to some difficult employees I had when I was in executive leadership, and I made a lot of excuses for the employees that were difficult when it came to performance because they were really great people. They were really kind, they were easy to get along with, easy to work with. And so since that part was easy, which doesn't lead to as much interpersonal conflict, I made a lot of excuses. Well, I also made excuses for people who had those attitude and behavior difficulties. And the reason I made excuses for them was because I just didn't know what to do. When I stepped into a leadership role with very little training in my 20s, I did not know what to do. So I just hoped that by trying to be a leader of kindness and integrity, that these people would come to see their error and that they would change. Well, spoiler alert, didn't change. Nothing changed. So it's critical that we know how to handle these difficult employees so that we can move towards these issues with confidence and with purpose. We can't ignore them. So we're going to go over 3 steps 3 things that you need to do as a leader when it comes to managing difficult employees. And the third one, we're going to flesh out a little more. Okay. So the third one's kind of a chunky one. Okay. Number 1, we have to define acceptable behavior and performance. We have to clearly state what that looks like. You cannot hold people to a standard that hasn't been defined. If it's not a defined standard, then it is just your opinion. And your assumption is that people can read your mind and they understand your opinion of what is expected. So when it comes to behaviors, chances are you already have a set of values that your company upholds, that you hold high and say, this is how we expect our people to behave. These are the markers that we want to define our organization. These are our values. And these are just simple words, and they could be 3 to 5 of them. So if you already have those values, then you can bring them back up. You can remind your team, these are our values. This is the standard to which we hold ourselves to. And if you don't have that, then this is a great time for your organization to decide, what are our official values? What is important to us, and what do we expect when it comes to how our people behave and interact with each other, with our customers? And when it comes to performance, you need to have a set of performance standards or KPIs, something that is written down where people can understand, this is what success looks like when it comes to performance. Here are the markers of success. Here's an example of how this plays out when you don't have those defined standards or expectations in place. So a customer service manager sees that some team members respond to those customer service emails right away, and some take longer, maybe by the end of the business day or the next day. So complaints are starting to roll in about those delayed responses. But the employees are kind of looking around being like, was I supposed to do this in a day? Was I supposed to return this email within an hour like that employee does over there? There was no clarity, no standard. And so we need to make sure we have really clearly defined what it is we expect when it comes to behavior, when it comes to performance. And that ultimate meeting kickoff guide that I talked about at the top of this episode is a great way for you to reinforce those values. There are spots in that template where you get to pull behavior that you see from the week and say, this was amazing that this employee did this thing. It completely represents so well what we say we value in this organization. So do not forget to grab that link. It's in the show notes too. Step number 2 is to separate the difficult behavior or performance from the person. It is very easy when we see rude behavior from an employee to, in our minds, label them as a rude person, or they are a lazy person or a disruptive person. We have given them this label, this judgment, and we will get nowhere as leaders if that is the mindset we have, viewing them as this kind of person instead of a person with value and integrity that is behaving like this. We address this, the issue, the behavior we see. And this is a huge mindset shift as a leader, because suddenly we're not combating a person. We are combating a behavior. We are on their team trying to help them see how they're behaving. And we are for them, fully for them, holding them accountable. And a commitment to this way of thinking about your people changes everything when it comes to how you address this as a leader. So now that you have defined the standard, and now that you have worked on your own mindset to try to see this person as not the behavior, but a person who is demonstrating this behavior, and you're addressing the behavior, not the person, not putting that label on them, we are now ready to go into our third step, which we're going to dive a little deeper into, and that is addressing it. Actually, what we do to address this behavior that is making this employee difficult to work with. So having resolved to not label them with a behavior and attitude, you don't have to go in and say, hey, it was really rude the other day in the meeting when you threw your arms up and dropped your pencil and crossed your arms and made a sigh of frustration. That was really rude. You don't need to say it like that, right? Because you've already determined that you don't need to call them rude. You don't need to label them as a person as rude. And I mean, think about it. If that's how someone started a conversation with you, it's probably not going to go well, right? It might not go well anyway, but it's definitely not going to go well if you go in right away accusing their character. It's like laying a verdict on them. Like this is who you are and you can't change. I don't foresee you changing, right? Like that's kind of the attitude that we bring into those conversations when we start with the other day at the meeting, you were rude when. So instead, we lead with facts and evidence. Now, we're not good at this. We're not naturally trained to discuss facts and evidence, right? Think about it. Most of the conversations you feel compelled to have are because of your thoughts and opinions about something, not just about the facts, right? You don't debate with someone over concrete facts. You debate with them over your opinions or your thoughts surrounding those facts. So this is not something that comes naturally to us. It's something we have to really work at. So in order to do this well, you need to be prepared for this meeting by writing down all of the facts. And you're looking at this list to make sure it is fact, that it is evidence-based. And so you can go to them and instead of the first approach, you just say, in the meeting the other day, you threw your arms up, you dropped your pencil, you crossed your arms, and you made a noise. And the impact of that was it disrupted the meeting. It drew attention away from the discussion we were having, and it made your coworkers feel uncomfortable and distracted. So you just stated the situation. This is the SBI method. The situation in the meeting the other day, the behavior, the fact of what you observed, you did these things, and I is the impact. And this was the impact that it had. You are just laying it out there, just telling the truth. That's all you're doing. You have no opinions. You have not made any claims about their character. You have just laid it all out there. And then that's it. You say it and you give them the opportunity to respond. You let them tell their story. And I mean, 9 times out of 10, they're going to blame shift or they're going to be defensive. And you know what? That's okay. That is not the purpose here isn't for them to have like a full change of attitude in this moment. You're just giving the opportunity for them to speak to the facts that you just laid out. And really the goal here is that they will acknowledge that it happened. That's really the goal. And this is coaching. So bad coaches tell the person that they are coaching what their problem is and what they need to do to fix it. And that's not really transformative at all. What is more effective is someone holding up a picture for you of the facts of what it is that you're telling them. And when you see it in front of you, blind spots are removed and you are able to make those discoveries for yourself. You're right. I did act like that. You're right. I am repeating this behavior. Okay, what am I going to do about it, right? It is that self-awareness, that self-discovery that is actually effective. And so what you are doing is you are coaching your employee. You're holding up a picture of what happened and you're letting them respond. And you go into this with very low expectations. So they finish telling their story and you don't need to respond to any of it. You can just say, thank you for sharing. Here are my expectations based on what we've defined, based on our values, based on our performance expectations. This is what I expect. And here are some consequences that could happen if you don't meet those expectations. And it is just like that. It's just fact. Thank you for sharing that. Now here's what I expect moving forward. And here's what will happen if those expectations aren't met. And you document that conversation and you move forward with feedback and follow through. So that feedback could be a week from now. You meet again and you give more facts. I've noticed that this hasn't been a problem this week, or in the meeting, this thing happened, right? You're just giving more feedback and then you're giving follow through if the expectation is met or if it isn't. And here's why this pattern and formula really works is because one of the reasons we hate doing this is because it feels personal. It feels like I am attacking you and I'm afraid you're going to feel that way. But that's not what's happening here. You're just stating facts and you're reminding them of expectations. And that is just your job and it is not personal. So those 3 steps again are: first, to define what those expectations look like. 2, to work really hard in your mind to separate labeling that person by that behavior, seeing them as a person with potential, with the ability to change, and then addressing just the behavior. And then the third is that actual act of addressing it. Now, maybe you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, but Kara, I haven't been doing this. And I've been managing some of these people for a really long time. So am I supposed to just start doing this next week? Like, aren't they going to think like this is ridiculous or this is a joke? They're not going to take it seriously because all of a sudden I'm getting to it when it comes to addressing their behavior. And yeah, you have work to do. You can start with clarifying expectations. Should be something that we do all the time. We should be doing this regularly, reminding people what our values are. And then from there, once you start there, like here's our high level expectations, then just be consistent in addressing it. And people will get used to this pattern quickly. But you got to do it, friend. You absolutely must. And these standards, how you address this, have to be the same for absolutely everybody. No one gets a pass. No one. And this is culture keeping. This is how you ensure that you have a thriving workplace culture. This is how you get the joy of watching your employees grow and change. And this is also how you eventually, in a documented, clear, evidence-based way, get to a point where if you actually have to do the hard thing of firing someone, you will have peace and knowing that that is what's best for your company and that is ultimately what is best for them. And another little final tip is that these kinds of conversations are a lot easier and they get easier if you have a regular culture of feedback on your team. If people are used to talking back and forth. And if that's not something that exists on your team, here is a super easy entry-level way you can start this week. When you have one-on-ones with team members, or in passing, casually, whenever you get to have a conversation with one of your employees, ask them this question: what could I start doing or stop doing that would make it easier for you to be successful in your work, right? Like, what can I start doing to help you? What can I stop doing that's hindering you? And that's a really honest question. And at first they might be like, ooh, you're great. Love you, manager, right? Like, they're not going to necessarily feel comfortable, and that's okay. It's the practice of asking the question and continuing to ask questions. And then eventually they will see that this isn't a one-off. This is something you really want, and feedback will start to happen. Another good question you can ask is, what don't you have that would help you execute your job in a way that would cause less stress, make your job easier, right? You're asking for feedback that is not so much towards you as much as it is their own job. So whatever the question is, maybe it's one of those 2 questions, just start engaging with casual, like informal feedback regularly. And that culture of feedback makes these more difficult conversations a little easier. So friends, here's my challenge for you. Right now, this week, who are those employees that are exhibiting difficult behaviors or performance? Who are they? What are the facts? Have those conversations this week. Plan to have them. I know it can feel scary and hard, but otherwise you are just stuck. And now you have the tools. Now you know what to do. So go and do it. This is good leadership. And I know you want to be a good leader. You are a good leader. So let's press forward and do it. What was something about these steps that you learned in this podcast episode that maybe surprised you, gave you a new insight? I would love to hear that from you. If you're watching on YouTube, will you drop it in the comments? And if you're listening on a podcast platform, would you please leave a rating and review? I would love to hear how this show is helping you, and that would just mean the world to me. Okay, friends, as always, I am cheering you on, and I'll talk to you next time.